Okay, so we're still holding in Siman Kuf Het, Halacha Taaruvot. The Siman discusses the Isur of baking, Heter ve'Isur b'Tanur Echad. Now, even though the Mechaber titles the Siman Shelo Le'efois, not to bake, he begins with Tzli. And we're going to see that it makes a big difference what exactly is happening in the oven. We've spoken about roasting. And roasting actually can happen in two ways, or maybe even three. One is an open pit, when you have the spit, when you're barbecuing. You can be barbecuing different kinds of foods, like a lot of people do on their barbecue. They put bell peppers, and they put corn, and they put meat. Well, that's not a problem. The problem is when you have Isur and Heter, obviously, in close proximity. Another tzli, however, that is considered tzli, but it has an additional name called tzli kedar, is when you have food, meat, for example, in a pot, but without any liquid. So that is called roasting. It's not cooking. Something that is being cooked in liquid. Something that is being roasted by the fire. It could be in a pot, but it doesn't have to be in a pot. It could be in an open fire. Or it could be being broiled, sitting on some mesh, some metal, as in the broiler, sitting on something, but without any liquid. So even though he begins to say that the Isur here Shelo Le'efois, we're going to see it's going to make a difference if it's actually a fiyah, baking, where there's no liquid involved, or some form of tzli, and bishul, which is all going to be discussed in the Siman as well. So briefly, just reviewing a little bit what we learned in Seif Aleph before we go into the Ramah. It's a long Ramah, so we only did half of it. We're talking about the problem of having Isur and Heter in the same tight enclosure, an oven. The concern over here is Reach. Right now, we're beyond Tam. Now we're going into something else. Reach. Reach is something that is discussed in the Gemara too. It's a machlok, as we said. Is Reach milsa or lav milsahu? Does it count? Is it meaningful? Does it matter or not? I mean, it's obviously an aroma, but will it affect? Will it be absorbed? After all, as some of the Rishonim say, there's no mamashas here. And if there's no mamashas, there's nothing that I can detect, then essentially there's no Isur. That was the machlokes the Gemara. And we have a machlokes Rishonim. How do we follow from the Gemara? There's no maskana in the Gemara itself. So who do we follow? Do we follow Rav or do we follow Levi? Levi is the one that says Leichon Lav Milsei. So it appears to be that the consensus, Rashi, the Mechaber follows that too, is that Leichon Lav Milsei, we follow Levi, as opposed to one opinion in Tosfos, two opinions, that we do follow Rav. We're always concerned about that sheet, of course. We do not say that because Reichel Lav Milsa, go ahead and in the same oven cook meat and milk, and we're going to talk about meat and milk, and definitely lechatchila, don't put Isur and Heter in the same oven, no matter how large it is. So some Rishonim and Achronim say that the whole halacha of Reichel Lav Milsa is really only an halacha b'di'evet. In other words, even according to those who hold that it's Reichel Lav Milsa, it's not lechatchila. And that is how the Mechaber pretty much learns. I mean, you can see it from his words. He says, ain't tzolin. You just don't do it. Not kosher meat with non-kosher meat in one oven, even though they're not touching. But if you did, so he says, if you did, it's mutar. Even if the asura was shemena. He goes to the extreme of, even if the asura was shemena. Right? And the muteris was lean. Right? But the evidence, it's okay. Now he says, there is one situation where I allow you to do it lechatchila. He says if it's a very large oven. A large oven that holds 12 Yisraelim. It's a very, very immensely large oven. And piv patuach, so he requires both conditions to make it work lechatchila. That it's a large oven and that it has a vent, some sort of ventilation, some sort of opening. He doesn't say how much of an opening, he just says piv patuach. So if you have a big oven and it's piv patuach, it's okay. As long as they're not touching. He does add, however, a very important condition that is always true, and everybody will accept this. That if it happens to be that one of them is covered with a lid or something, or even with dough, even if the oven is small, it's not a problem. This is an important detail to keep in mind when we talk a little bit about Basar b'chalav later on. That's right. Yeah. One of them has a lid on top of it. Where's the reach going to go? No problem. They're not touching, right? There's no time involved here. Now, we're not going to go into all the various chilukim that we spoke about last time, even though yes.
You said even if it's dough?
Yeah, because the dough, good question. What does the dough do? The dough acts as a sealant like a lid.
But is it now one or the other? Is it the dough more?
No. Right now, the dough that's covering the isser or the heter is preventing the reach.
Assume for the moment
Yeah.
the dough is covering the thing. You then take it out of the oven. Eat the dough. Is it cooked? You bake the dough.
Right.
You now have some kind of mizah.
Right.
Is that more because it has
Oh.
the reach?
Very good question. We're going to talk about that today. In other words, what is the din of the dough? There's a certain halacha that pertains to dough. So I'll cover it when we speak about the dough. But generally speaking, the dough acts as a sealant, and the food over here is not affected. At least that which is underneath the dough is not affected. You may claim, well, maybe the food is not, but the dough is perhaps affected by the reach. Maybe not. Since anyway we hold b'di'evet it's okay, the Mechaber himself said, that we assume that he's saying that even the dough is okay. Otherwise he should have said something. But anyway, we'll talk about the dough separately for another idea altogether. So even though last time we covered various chilukim of different size ovens and openings, and actually it would be perhaps beneficial to prepare a chart where we can see what each one holds depending on the circumstances of what size the oven is, how big the opening is. I don't think we need to go into that. Because basically, lechatchila, even the Mechaber agrees. Don't do it. But the evidence, he says, even if it's small and closed, it's okay. And the Ramah, who doesn't like that b'di'evet, says, me too, behefsed meruba. Okay? So that's why I'd rather not go into the various other chilukim, whether the opening is small or large, the oven is large, oven is small. And then of course we have a situation where if you have two things that are kochush, lean, there's no real reach, it may not be a problem either. Here we're discussing something that is shmeina, but in the event that they both are kochush, obviously if you're baking things that don't have any or as much reach, it wouldn't be a problem. Okay, now before we go on perhaps and read the Ramah inside, I'm going to mention some halachas that you may have covered in Basar b'chalav, because that's where they're mentioned, and see how they apply to our situation. There is a halacha in Basar b'chalav that you can't make dairy bread. You remember that? Why not? It's great. Dairy bread, you have a bread machine, and you go to the supermarket, and they have the entire bag recipe. Just throw it in, and forget about it. Wake up in the morning to fresh, aromatic garlic bread, or whatever it is. Tasty. Did you ever try it? Some of them have dairy ingredients inside. You can't use it. Why not? I'm making dairy bread. It's xera. That's all it is. What's xera? You may come to eat it with fleishiks. Some people like to have bread with every meal. With meat. Same thing, you can't make fleishik bread because you may come to eat it with dairy. How would you make fleishik bread? If the dough, by mistake, was mixed with shuman of basar. That's all. It can happen. Right? If the dough was mixed with shuman, fleishik shuman, fat, right? Then it's fleishiks. It would be also for you to eat it with melichas. There's only two situations where you can eat the dairy bread with fleish or the meat bread with milch. Two situations. One, when it's a small amount, very small amount that you could easily finish it in one meal, and you can of course eat it with the right one. Or if it has a special tzura, a special shape, this baking, this bread, this cookie is so unique in its shape that you would never make the mistake of eating burekas, right? Cheese burekas with meat, because everybody knows this is, if it happens to have that particular shape that is recognized, easily identifiable as something that you would never eat it with the wrong food.
Does it only have to be identified to be to the cloud?
Well, that's a good question. I think we're talking about at least in that household, because other people coming into your house, and they're not going to eat without your permission. But usually something that is identifiable in your house, I guess, is also identifiable elsewhere. It has to basically be enough of a siman that it would not lead you to a situation where now you may have a suffix. Whether is this milk or not milk, dairy or not dairy, I want to eat it with milk, or I forgot it's dairy, So at least for yourself, it should not be a problem. It should not be an issue. If that's the case in that halacha, do we apply reach to that gzera too? That's question number one. That's point number one that we want to discuss. Now that we are familiar with reach, we know what the halacha is, the reach. We know that some things are lechatchila, others are b'diavad. But what about, do we extend this iser of at least lechatchila, of reach, to this other question? Bake bread that was baked in an oven with meat, but it was not in a situation where it actually absorbed the meat and it became free. All it was is a situation where it absorbed the reach of the meat. Follow? So that's what we've been talking now between Isser and Heter. Do we apply the absorption of reach, right, in the same way we did in Basar b'cholov, that bread cannot be eaten now with Melicha? Or do we say, no, recha lav milsahi, it's nothing. And because it's nothing, it doesn't affect the bread even for me to eat with Melicha? Good question, no? So we have a machlekes. The Shach says that you do apply, that you would say the same thing that you said legabe recha lechatchila. You say legabe this halacha of not eating such bread that absorb the aroma of flesh in the same oven with Melicha. The Pri Chodosh, the Minches Yehuda, say it's mutter. The gzera that we have in Basar b'cholov does not apply to recha as well. Yeah, but if you look at the various achronim, Megodim, Chochmasodom, they pass like the Shach. They say that you should answer it. The reason why they say so is because, if I remember correctly, at least one of them says that you don't need to. You made a mistake, you can still eat that bread. It's not that you can't eat the bread. Just eat it at the right meal, at the right time. So it's like a situation which it's like a lechatchila thing. Don't do it if you can avoid it. So a mistake was made, you baked it in the same oven. Next time don't do it. Now that you did, just wait till tomorrow morning and have it for, wait till tomorrow night and have it for dinner or whatever. Okay, we did say that one of the ways that one can be helped in an oven is if one of them is mechusa, one of them is covered. The same is true about Basar b'cholov, as I'm going to describe soon. If you have one of them covered, then technically you should be able to make cheesecake and steak at the same time in the oven. The same halacha that applies to Isser and Heter applies to Basar b'cholov. So this kisui, one of them covering the other, prevents the problem of recha. So what should be the problem? Why don't we do it today, lechatchila? So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But l'chorah, that's true. It would be the same thing. Now, Tosfos brings down, I believe Tosfos is the one that brings down, that if you have bread baking in an oven with a pastida, you know what a pastida is? It's a quiche of sorts. You know what that is? It's dough with meat inside. So it's not plain meat. It has dough. It could be a sort of kugel too. Imagine. In other words, kugel is potatoes, but you have something that is doughy, floury on the outside and all around, a shell, a crust perhaps, and it's filled with meat. Some sort of meatloaf even. So the Tosfos says you can bake that bread with the meatloaf or with this pastida at the same time. Why? Because the meat in the pastida is covered with the dough. It's like a lid. And that bread now and that challah you can have for breakfast with your cheese. That dough will not allow the reach to be mispashet, to spread. The Shach, of course, having told us that, he's machmer in the other case, says, don't do this lechatchila either. Tosfos says it shouldn't be a problem. Apparently it's not a real problem because you don't have the recha. But still, lechatchila, don't do this. You're baking meat in the oven. Don't break chalas at the same time, because that challah, even though you usually eat it with your flesh, with your Shabbos meals, you may have leftovers, big challah. You're going to have it perhaps with a grilled cheese sandwich. Yeah, one of the children will take it, and what's wrong? It's challah. Yeah, but that challah was baked at the same time that the meat loaf. Right? Okay, but the evidence it's okay. But the chatchila don't do it. Okay, the next point that will come up in the Ramah, and I'll just cover it outside first. Even though we may be lenient in some cases with Reicha, there is one case where we're usually not lenient. If the heter, at least the heter, is a dover chorif, onions is a dover chorif, it's sharp. And the nature of a dover chorif, that over time it absorbs, it is a magnet, it acts as a magnet to the reach. And that's a very interesting point. Have you ever heard about the halacha of not leaving onions that are cut outside overnight? Garlic, you ever heard? Unless you've left the head on the onion, if you've completely peeled it off, use it right away. Don't leave it even in the fridge. It's mitame sakona. Have you heard that, Ilan? The halacha concerning onions that are cut, garlic that is cut, that you don't leave it overnight. Unless if you did cut up a lot, you put it a little bit in the oil, or you cook it. But don't leave it, or leave the head on.
But I heard it's the root part of the onion.
Right, the root, the head, whatever it is, the side, the top and the bottom. Either or, yeah.
I see.
Yeah. If you leave part of it, it's okay. It says mitneh sakana. Now, it is not really clear to us what the sakana really is. Is it something to do with mazikin? They have discovered, however, recently, that onions that are left out overnight, cut up, are very, very much attracting bacteria to themselves. Very, very much attracting bacteria, more than the usual if they're completely cut up, if you leave them overnight. Very interesting. I wonder if this is related. I don't know for sure. Demons and all kinds of things. Yeah, there's all kinds of demons.
But this halacha is not related to leaving.
No, that's something else. That has to do with serpents, with snakes, and all kinds of other things. Yeah, it's also sakana, different kinds of sakana. Here, it's not really clear what the sakana is. I mean, it doesn't say, the sakana is because of that. Yeah, so therefore we are careful. We definitely are careful, and it
any cutting you must.
Not all things, just onions and garlic.
Once you put,
once you open it, use it. People like to cut half and use it and put the other half in the fridge. It's okay as long as the head, the bottom and the head, the roots are still there. Then it's okay. Where some of the peels are still there and some of it is still there. Right. Something, yeah. But if it's completely peeled, and half an onion or garlic, just putting it in the fridge, it's a problem. And it's a problem with the commercial garlics that you buy in bags. In other words, this could apply to many situations. Now, are people being affected by this? Could be. Maybe you're getting stomach aches. I don't know. It could be that it's a chashash sakana. In other words, it could lead to problems. It doesn't mean it's always going to be a problem. But if this is true and it's related, that it's a magnet to attract bacteria, onions attract more than other vegetables, especially if they're completely exposed, even in the fridge, right? Then I would understand why.
Would wrapping it help?
No.
Interesting.
Right. Unless you put it in oil. You mix it in oil. Somehow that takes away.
You can get it oil because the oil.
Maybe.
Rubbed it.
Yeah. I'm not sure what it is. So anyway, I saw that, and I saw this report recently about attracting bacteria. So here we're learning the halacha of reicha, and if it's a dover chorif, the Ramah is going to tell us that even though I told you bedi ever before, that the tanur cotton and all these kind of situations, the reiach is going to be behefsed, or hefsed meruba, it's going to be okay, not if it's a dover chorif. Why? Because the dover chorif, it's going to be boleya mor reiach. It's going to magnet, it's going to attract and absorb much more of the reiach because it's a dover chorif. And we're talking here about at least the dover heter being the chorif, because we're talking about it absorbing. The other one that's a chorif, who cares? Supposedly, it won't emit more, it's absorbing more. I don't care if the Isra absorbs, I care about the heter absorbed. But I think the Ramah might say, I don't remember, or some say that regardless which one it is. The Ramah says that if the Imna Isur Davar Choref, the Choshek in my head Davar Choref, he doesn't seem to be distinguishing between the two, but it appears from the other Poiskim that it's especially true if the heter is a Davar Choref. The Ramah doesn't seem to me a chiluk. So that's the Gabi Davar Choref. I think it's the Isur Veheter that he says that it's Asur. If the Isur is Choref too. But the Pricholer is Mekel. In other words, he says that the main thing is if the heter is a Davar Choref, not the Isur. Okay, another halacha we will see in the Ramah is you have an Isur and a heter being roasted underneath a machvas, underneath a tray. Now apparently, it should make a difference. What's the difference between underneath a tray versus a small oven, where the roof of the oven is sitting on top of them? So it's interesting that he brings down this halacha, and the Achronim discuss this halacha. I mean, what is the chiddush over here? Because he seems to be saying that it's asur. Why should this be more asur than a small oven that you yourself said it's mutter behefzer at least? So nobody really knows why he's being more makbid in the machvas. Now, obviously, it could be a machvas is much closer to them and enhances or strengthens the reach even more. There could be various explanations as to why a machvas is more of a problem. However, he does say that if you did one after another, that's not a problem, because reach is not something that's going to be absorbed in the machvas, and then later on when you bake something else under that same machvas, that something else is going to, grab the reach that's in that machvas. That we don't say. But having them at the same time could be a problem. Now, if you remember from Basar B'cholov and Tzadik Beis, I think it's Tzadik Beis, where you have Basar or Chalav underneath Basar. Remember that? If you have a situation where somebody was cooking or baking, I should say, lasagna, and on the top row, or the top, what do you call those metal grates?
In the oven?
In the oven, yeah. You were roasting meat or chicken. Okay? They're both open. And one is right beneath the other one. They're not side by side. In some ways, one underneath the other could be worse. What is the potential problem other than reach when you have something underneath the other? This is only really mentioned in Basar B'chol, and it's addressed much more than it is in Taaruvot. I'm not sure why. Remember Zeya? There's a concept called Zeya. What's Zeya in English? The steam. Right. The steam can be more of an issue than the reach. Even though the Gemara doesn't talk really much about that, the Zeya does appear to be a problem because there's something left there. There's something left there that can be an issue. And here, the Melicha pot underneath the Fleishike pot, that Zeya coming out of the Melicha pot is going to affect the pot sitting on top, the meat pot. It's not going to be reach itself. It's going to be steam. It's going to be full of tam, that it's going to go into the pot that's sitting on top. So Zeya will pose more of a problem than reach will. And that was the halacha in Basar B'cholov, that you cannot have one underneath the other. Remember also the other case in Siman Tzadik Gimel about Kisui Gdera. Somebody by mistake took the lid of the milchik pot and put it on top of the fleishik pot. It can happen. Not necessarily it was on top of the stove. He just took it out. Oh, I need to cover it. Oh, I used the wrong lid. Oh. Now what? Remember that halacha is discussed in Tzadik Gimel.
He takes it from a hot pot.
Right. But even if it's not a hot pot, if the bottom is hot, remember Tato Gavar? But that's only a problem if it's a ben yoima. Whenever something is not a ben yoima, we're safe, relatively. The pot is not safe. The pot now has basar b'cholov in it, and you have to kasher it. But the food might be okay. Right? Somebody cooked up food in a treif pot, but it's not ben yoima. Can you eat the food? Yeah, the food can be eaten. But it was used for pork. Yeah, but it's not a ben yoima, it's pogum. As long as it's clean. Right, but the pot or the lids that that have absorbed now basar and chalav, of course, require hagola. So that would be perhaps a problem here too, whenever you would have Zeya involved. Just like you have in Basar B'cholot, obviously you can have that problem in Isra and Heter. It was not so much a concern of the Mechaber. He does not address it. He addresses only Reach over here. But obviously, if that were to be the problem, which we will see in Sif Beis, there's pros and cons to cooking something in the oven versus baking. But we'll leave it for now. I will get to it hopefully soon. But Zeya appears to be, if you read all the various halachas that concern Zeya, it appears to be more of a problem than Reach. That it would be also even B'di'evet. And in the case of Basar B'cholot, if one is right underneath, or even in Isra B'heter, it could actually affect the pot. It could answer the whole thing. Now, another thing that we will see in the Ramah, and I'm intentionally going through the main points so that when we read through the Ramah, we go quickly through it. Since there's quite a few of them, it's not a short Ramah. Another issue that's addressed in the Ramah is Bitul. Now, we are familiar with Bitul B'shish. Well, what would you say to Isser and Heter in the same oven? But the good news is that we have so much Heter in the oven. Do we say Bitul B'shishim? In other words, we have the Isser here emitting aroma. You can't do it lechatchila, of course. Okay, fine. But it's b'di'evet. But do I need a hefsem meruba, or do we say, you know what, there's bitul, there's enough anyway between all the chalas, or I should say between all the heter, there's shishim keneged the Isser, keneged the reach. So here, the Shach explains, the Ramah explains, the Shach goes into it a little bit deeper, that we don't say that necessarily. Well, why not? Because it could be, as the Shach says, that some of the heter absorb more of the reach than others. In bishul, what's the chiddush of bitul b'shishim in bishul? The tam spreads it out evenly. Great, that's what bitul is all about. But can we say that by reach? Not necessarily, unless you apply the unique halacha of Siman Kuf Yud Aleph here. And what's that unique halacha that we've mentioned before? Of two kederas that are eventually going to be combined. You have an Isser that fell into one, you don't know which one. Between the two you do have shishim, even though they're separate, eventually they can be combined. Here, they're eventually going to be combined.
Where are they eventually here?
Outside. I mean, somehow it's all being baked at the same time. It's like being combined. Yeah.
Don't you have a problem?
Yeah, ein mevatel Isser lechatchila. So you don't want to do that. You never want to do that lechatchila. So we're talking about here b'di'evet. I agree. Good point. Except that there is a Pri Megadim here that says, hey, wait a minute, what about min b'minoi? Over there it's only min b'minoi. Pri Megadim says we can be lenient here min b'she'eno mino too. Why? Because it's only reach. Since it's only reach, you can be lenient that unique halacha of that everything is mitzdaref, which is not a real bittul. I mean, it is eventually a bittul, right? Here, it may not be a good bittul because maybe the reach has affected one more than the other, but you can apply it not because of bittul, but because of the tziruf that you're going to have when you get them all out of the oven. And this could apply. Pri Megadim says even b'min b'she'eno minoi says. Because that halacha is only b'min b'minoi. Only b'reach. You would say here also min b'she'eno minoi. Very interesting. Okay.
So over there it was min mino, so the 60 which we get through tziruf is only the Rabbana. We need the 60, right? Min
Right.
Only the Rabbana. So a 6, we need the Rabbana, we can obtain with tziruf. And since they're standing to combine anyway, so we say we're going to treat them as though they were already combined. So when do we say that? When the 60 we're trying to establish in this matter is in a Rabbanan Dika 60 anyway.
Yes.
Here we need by Reach, we're also talking about the Rabbanan 60.
Okay, so there's a little bit of a machlokes between the Shach and the Taz. So maybe that's what you're touching on. The Taz says this is a special kula by Reach. Taz says this is a special kula by Reach. And the Shach says no. From what he's medayik in the Ramah, this would be like any other isurim that we would only allow for the hefsem meruba situation. We don't think that this is special and more lenient, and because of that we can say this or we can say that. No, it's the same thing like everything else, and we would only allow it by hefsem meruba. Just applying a different, I guess what you call it, svara as to why should we say it's mutter. But still, it's only by hefsem meruba. Doesn't make it any less that it's reach. The Taz says no, it's a special halacha in the din of reach that we can allow for bitul as a result of another surah called tziruf. All right, interesting. At least we know that by hefsed or hefsed meruba, we can rely on that. Another interesting point that the Ramah brings down, and eventually we'll read it inside, is what would you say about Isur Mashu? Do you remember the famous concept of Mashu? Sometimes something becomes Asur b'Mashu. When is that? Typically, Pesach. That's the one we're most familiar with. Chametz Asur b'Mashu on Pesach only. So what would you say about the Reach? Is Reach a Mashu?
Well, if you want to learn from Pomer, sometimes
it does appear the way the Rishonim learn that even if you hold according to Levi, Dareach, Lav Milsahi, it doesn't mean that it's not a Mashu. It still could be a Mashu, and if it is a Mashu, then on Pesach it's a problem if somebody by mistake baked matzahs in this oven that had a Mashu of Chometz. At the same time, in this case, a Reach of Chometz, right? Not that the Mashu got into the matzahs exactly, or Moshes, but the Reach got into. In other words, should we treat the Reach as a Mashu? Because the Reach, apparently, according to some, is a Mashu. That's where the Machloikis is. Is the Reach a Mashu? And if the Reach is a Mashu, then this may make a difference to Gabet Pesach, which is also the Mashu.
So here the Mashu who is not going, I understand it correctly,
right.
The Mashu here, then it is the Mamashas.
Exactly, that's the question, right? That's one of the questions.
The Mashu here means the Mamashas?
Apparently.
And not just a small quantity.
Apparently. The Gabet the din of Mashu, it becomes a Mamashas. Right. Ramah brings down the 2 days, which we'll see, and he holds that they have some Meruba, you can be lenient. Now, once you begin to discuss the issue of Mashu, you have if you read it, if you go through all the poskim on this, it's interesting. You will actually see and a repetition of all the chilukim that we've seen till now, where you don't have chometz. You will see. Well, what about if the Mashu, the Reach and Pesach is a double chorif? What if it's kochush? What if it's a tanur cotton? What if it's a tanur gadol? All the chilukim that we've seen till now, there's those chilukim by legabe Pesach too, legabe that Mashu. Okay, you say it's a Mashu, and it's a problem. Will it make a difference if it's a davar charf, according to those who say it's okay? But what if it's charf? What if it's kochosh? What if it's a tanur cotton and all that? They go through that too. And the Mishnah Berurah even discusses this. There's a Mishnah Berurah on some of this that says you can be lenient in some of these situations, the Gabba Pesach. Even though we're machmir in Pesach usually, we're machmir in Mashu, but because it's a Reach, and as it is, we know that we pass like Levi. And Amai that we want to be machmir, but if you have other reasons to be makel, you could be makel. So especially Hefsed, you don't have time to bake new matzahs or new food for Pesach. You may be able to rely on that. So we have quite a few chilukim here too. Okay, so maybe before we go to Sif Beis, I'm going to quickly read through the remaining portion of the Ramah. So we learned last time that if you bake bread with Basar, asur le'ochloi mecholov, im yesh lo pas acher, the Ramah was a little bit lenient if you do have some other bread. You shouldn't buy that bread that was baked in an oven with the reach if you have other bread, because all of this is called lechatchila. If you don't have other bread berevach, it's mutter. Okay, then the Ramah brought the other svara that ein matir reich afilu b'di'evet unless it's mokum hefset en lehachmir afilu sosum legamre. All right, the imay isu davar chorev. This is where we left off. If the isu is a davar chorev, as we just reviewed. It's more of a problem. It's the heter is davar chorev. Reicho mil sohi. We hold reicho mil sohi by davar chorev. Afilu bedi eved also. So he's very makpid, very machmir on davar chorev, even bedi eved. Yishnei megulim. Of course, if both were exposed and one of them was not covered. Avali mechad mehem mechusuf. One of them is closed. Afilu bebatzuk v'hama. Even with just with dough, it's mutter. Im afu tzolu isu veheter tachas machvas. As we just learned, if you baked or roasted isu and heter underneath a pan, megulin exposed osur. Afilu b'di'evet. Uadinim afu b'chiyah gavnu pasim basar also ochel b'cholov. You baked in this way. Bread with meat, you cannot eat that bread with cholov. As we explained before, it's a gzera. There's nothing wrong with the bread, but you just can't eat it with dairy. Aval, he says, if it's one after another, this is an important point. We're going to soon see why. If it's one after another, in lochush. Don't be concerned. Elaim Kin, he ziyah machvas mishneim. Here he brings in ziyah, unless that pan is sweating. There was a steam coming out of it. and both of them are mezia. So if there's zeya, it's worse than reach. In what way? That the zeya will come and extract the other zeya or the blias, the plitas, from the machvas that's there. So if you have things that are emitting a lot of zeya, even if it's bezeh achar zeh, it could be a problem. Unless it's dry goods, things that are being baked that don't have zeya.
But don't we say today that our oven heat so that it doesn't remain anything for
Good point. That could be true if it's not at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. So very good point. If it's one after the other, it could be that we don't really have any time real zeya. So we're going to get to that when I talk about the sugya of how to make pizza and steak at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Sounds
Yeah. In just a minute.
As long as you don't-
Yeah. Exactly. So if you have zeya, it could be a problem even zeya achar zeh. If they are both megulin, the habik kisu shekder is similar to the halacha of kisu shekder, the cover of a pot. Kedeleil siman tzadik gimel. Yesh omer the kol mokom damino reicho milsa ba'oisa b'di'evet hain dafko deleko shisha min ha'heta neged ha'isur. Like we just said, there are those who say that anytime you hold reicha milsa, it's something, and it's also b'di'evet. That's dafka when you don't have shishim in from the heter neged ha'isur. But b'di'ika shishim min ha'heta. What if you had so much more heter than the isur? Afilu b'chol ma shebatanu, in all that's in the oven, mevatal ha'isur. Again, if you're talking about a situation where there's a hefsed, you can rely on this opinion. Some say that if the isur is such a strict isur that it's also b'mashu, like chometz and Pesach, you do say reach milsahu. So here he does make this point that he would only agree so far that it's also that if it's a tanur cotton, obviously, and it closed. By isur beheter megulin, they're both exposed. But anytime you take away any of those, large oven, opening, or one of them is closed or covered, it's not a problem. Some say we don't differentiate between isur mashu and other isurim. You can rely on those who are lenient. That even the b'di'evet, even if it's closed in a small oven, b'di'evet, it would be okay. בעין לקמון, in Siman Kuf Yudches, אם יש להחמיר לכתחילה לשפויס, בייס קדרוס, ואיך אומר שאיסור על הקיר, ליצוס איסור אצל ההתר. Later on, in another Siman, it discusses if you're allowed to put two pots on the stove, not in the oven, one next to each other, one is isur and one is mutter, or to roast them, one next to each other, but it's in the open air. That's going to make a big difference. That's not going to be such a big problem. There's no reach, there's no zeya. Right? What could happen? What could happen is that you can get mixed up. Right? So if you go to the park and the guy wants to make a barbecue next to you on the same thing, you don't want to be close to it, even though it's all in the open. Things can flow from his to yours. All kinds of problems can arise from that. So he says that's going to be discussed later on. Now, in Seif Beis, I'm not going to go too far, just Seif Beis, because after Seif Beis we will have enough information to figure out how to deal with dairy in the same oven. So in Seif Beis, the Mechaber tells us, what we've learned till now, that's only when you're roasting in an oven. But, you know what? If what you're going to insert into that oven is something to be cooked, which is interesting. I have a question to you. I'm not a chef, right? Why would somebody cook something in the oven? Cooking is usually done on the stove.
Does it all the time.
Okay. Now, by the way, if you're going to put something in the oven with a lid on it, or even without a lid, with handles, you want to make sure they're not rubber. Okay? Because we do have, speaking of reach, yeah. Because we do have pots and pans that we use on top of the stove that have rubber handles, or whatever. Those are not intended for the oven. So anyway, there are pots that are sometimes put into an oven. Why would you do that? So let's hear.
He said his wife does.
Yeah, okay. Maybe he knows by now. How many years are you married?
I know.
Oh, Baruch
Still
Hashem.
written.
Yeah, okay.
Going on it.
So why would you? Okay. Now it could be the recipe calls for that.
When my wife bakes, we filter fish.
Yeah,
What's liquid in it?
exactly. Yeah.
Probably nothing with.
Usually, people that put something into an oven, they're baking it, and there's not so much liquid in it. That's what I figured. And because of that, if it would be on top of the stove with the flame, they always have to adjust it, lower it. Why would you put little liquid in it on top of the stove?
Dry
So
out.
it's more of a baking, but it shouldn't dry out completely to put a little bit liquid. It could also be because of what they call today convection ovens. Convection ovens, if you're familiar with the technology, is that the air flows all around the warm air and it heats up more evenly. It could be that by putting something in a pot with liquid into an oven, it could be, I haven't tried it, it will come out differently because the heat, it's getting heat from all sides versus having heat from the bottom. I don't know. It could be it will come out differently. But anyway, it is possible to put into an oven when you don't have a stove. That's the other scenario. You don't have a stove. All you have is an oven. Now, when would they do that? In the olden days, they would do that for Shabbos. Everybody would be putting their cholent at home into the baker's oven, into the big oven of the Melicha, right? Where the Jewish quarter is, right? And that's to keep it warm. But technically, you can also bake or roast something in the oven, which is what I said before. There's two kinds of roasting. One is tzli kedar. It's in a pot without liquid. That's roasting, or barbecuing kind of roast. In other words, no liquid involved, pure fire. Okay. So Sif Beis says like this. The Mechaber says, as far as our problem with reach, it's only batzli. If you're going to be putting two pots into the oven, and they have liquid in them, supposedly, or even without liquid, he doesn't say it. Here he doesn't say, but if you learn the Beis Yosef, you will see what he's talking about. Because he's talking about levashno, which usually means it has liquid. Next to each other. Afilu betaner koton upiv sotum, even a small oven and it's closed. Mutar, lechatchila. There is megula, even though they're both exposed. Wow. If they're in pots, you're safe. What happened to the reach? There's no reach. There's no reach when you are putting something in a pot. Why not? So here there's a machlokes, the Rashba and the Beis Yosef.
Are we talking about no pots or the...
Oh, that's that we're going to get to that. Right now, all we know is that they're in pots. No lids even. Even if they're in pots.
Right.
They're not on the pan. They're not sitting on the grill, right? Where they have reach picking up from all around. They're inside their own enclosure called a pot. And both pots are in the oven next to each other. But in Bale Vashlam, now the Ramah says Davka Shatanu Patuach Tzas. That's the Ramah. If it's closed all around, like the people who take their cholent to be matmin, to put in to the coals in between the other coals on Shabbos, it's also. Some say it's even b'di'evet also. If they're both exposed. He wants to be lenient even himself. What's going on over here? We have two opinions as to why the pots make a difference. The Rashba brings down an explanation to this. This is all learned from the Gemara, by the way, from the same sugya over there. That the difference in a pot is the liquid. When something is inserted in liquid, it doesn't emit as much reich. That's what the Rashba explains. There's not that much reich coming out if something is in a pot. What's the pot doing to it? It's not the pot, he says. It's the liquid in the pot. Beis Yosef says, Mapiton, what are you talking about? Whoever told you that? Where do you get that from? If anything, what's indicative from the Gemara, it's not the liquid. Beis Yosef brings a raya that has nothing to do with the liquid. It's the partition of the pot itself. The metal acts as a wall, as a barrier, separating it from the reach on the outside. Whereas wherever the reach was a problem, reach the Roma, is because there was no such partition. He says, if you put up a whole pile of coals separating the Isra and the Heter, you'd have the same thing. If there would be something in between them, there wouldn't be as much, at least as much as a problem, of the reach. So he says the reason the pots are able to help you, that's the way he learns, is not because of liquid. It's because of the partition. What's the nafka mina between these two? Tzli kedar, people who roast in a pot without liquid. Very little. Peter, put a music. No. You don't have liquid, but you have a pot. So according to the Rashba, it's not good enough. According to Beis Yosef, it is. No, we haven't gotten to chit yet.
No, but that's in the middle, which would act as a pot.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah, but we haven't gotten to that yet, because it could be that that's very, very low, and here you're putting something in and it has a taller partition. It could be, the cheesecake does reach till the top of the form. It doesn't, no. But that's the way I understand it, because if you read the Beis Yosef inside on the tour, you'll see he talks about the whole thing being a division, a wall, separating this meat, this heter, from the Isser. In other words, there's no reach that penetrates.
That the wall is out because they're on the
Oh, I see what you're saying. Maybe if you're saying that the Isser has a wall. The Isser has a wall. Could be, yes. If one of them has a wall.
One of them has a wall.
Yes.
Whether it's over, because it doesn't
Right.
go over the top. It's
Yeah,
just side to side.
you're right. Perhaps that's a good point. Because I didn't see anybody talking about it. But perhaps that's also true. If one of them had a wall, it would be sufficient.
But what do you mean by wall?
It was one of them is inside a pot. The other one is
with
not.
the pots being higher, that's content.
You know what? I'm not really sure. One second. Let's think about it. Because if the heter is in a pot and the isser is not in a pot, because the isser is not in a pot, the reach is traveling everywhere. Remember, it's going everywhere. But the other one is in a pot, so it's somewhat protected. No, forget about liquid for a moment. No liquid. Would the aroma go all over the place? Or do you need both of them having a pot? That's a good question. Yeah, I would say that based on what the Mechaber says, he just says that if there are two, they're both in a there's enough protection between the two. Once you have one of them outside, it could be that there's not as much protection. Could be, but it's a good question. But the point here is that this is a big difference. And what's the difference between the Rashba and the Beis Yosef? Tzli Kedar, as it's called, roasting in a pot, meaning baking or putting it into a pot without liquid. And if you don't have liquid, that's a form of roasting. And so the Rashba says, but there's no liquid. The Beis Yosef says, I don't need the liquid. It's in a pot. That's what the difference between the two. Because the Mechaber is only using a language of avalim bole vashlom. You're coming to cook.
But cook is always.
Yes, exactly. You're using pots over here. But if you see the Beis Yosef, he says, lav dafka. It's not the liquid, it's just that the pots. And he calls that a form of cooking. Or he calls the pot cooking versus not being in a pot, calling it sli. Alright, now that we understand the various chilukim of how reach works, how zeya works, how it can make a difference if the two are uncovered or not covered, how it could make a difference if they're in a pot or not in a pot, how if it's a big oven or a small oven, right? We more or less got a little bit of an idea of this. Now let's tackle the problem of basar b'cholov in the same oven. Now, if you ask your rabbi, and he's somewhat familiar with these halachas, why don't you just get two ovens and forget the problem? Thank you very much for your help. Obviously, a kosher kitchen, even non-Jews know you have two of everything. 2 dishwashers, 2 microwaves, 2 ovens. And if you can afford it and if you can have it, really, I agree, that's the best. You can have them both going on at the same time. If you have self-cleaning ovens, then you're even safe for Pesach. Even less problems. There's no doubt about it that you can be yotze all of days by having 2 ovens. But I know people that have 1 sink. Even these days. Only 1 sink. And that is a little bit of a problem for washing dishes. Melichas and fleishiks. You can get around it, but it's a problem. Ovens is less of a problem. And let's see why. Even though 2 is better. How could you get away with it? How could you get away with 1 oven?
Don't eat any milk.
You want to make
The other is not a problem.
you want to make cheesecake and you want to make chicken. All right? How to do it? 1 oven. What are the issues? Well, we have reach, we have zeya. Same thing, all that we've discussed till now. And the Ramah said clearly that the same halacha of Isur v'Heter applies to Basar b'Chalav. So we know they are the same issues. But what would be a way around it? Since Isur v'Heter we don't plan to do lechatchila. It's always going to be a b'diavad anyway. Especially that we learned that that's the halacha, that we followed Levi, but we follow it b'diavad. Even in a Tanur Gadol. But Basar b'Chalav, there are times that we can't wait, that we need to do them almost at the same time. Because waiting might be an option. What's the option of waiting? Well, the option of waiting, as Moshe Feinstein discusses, as others rabbis suggest, is listen, you made fleishiks today, make melichiks tomorrow. And that's the general, by the way, advice that all balabastas are being given who have only one oven. Do not make basar and chalav in the same day. Not even, forget about the same time. Not even the same day. Why? What's wrong with having it the same day? If you have zayah, or if you have shamnunis or lachluchis or dirt, it's going to be a problem. But dirt of any kind, you always want to make sure that it's clean. If you're going to be putting something there, it's melacheks. So cleaning it is not as much of a problem because hopefully you're always going to clean it, right? The problem is the zayah, not the reach, because it's not happening at the same time. Things that are meziyah, we're talking about things that are meziyah, present a problem. We saw that in the Ramah. Even though b'di ebed, you will see that the vast majority of poskim may hold that it's okay b'di ebed. But we're talking about the chatchila now. The chatchila of zayah is one of the problems. So even though it's not happening at the same time, if you wait 24 hours, it's pogum. It's eino ben yoima. But I need to have it the same day. Oh, you need to have it the same day. Turn on the oven for 15 minutes, a half an hour, and burn it up. Make a little bit of a libun. Like Elon was saying before, I mean, the heat sometimes is so strong that it burns it up. Well, in case there's any left over and you turn it on again now, after you finish your chicken, you may be able to get rid of that zayt. Now remember, this is on condition that everything inside is clean. That's very, very important. Otherwise, you're sitting on flesh maybe. So that's a possibility too.
Why don't we say that the reach and something cooking, you open the door,
because it's still hot. Even after you finish baking, it's still hot. It's still there. I mean, there's a residue always, yeah. So here's a good example of things that... So now, the question is, what if it's something that is not meziyah? Well, I want to bake challahs after I made my steak. No problem whatsoever. Nobody ever said that was a problem. The problem is only with things that are meziyah. Okay? So here's where bishul comes into play. Bishul has liquid, steam. Remember, bishul was an advantage here. When you have two at the same time, you have the walls, you have the liquid. Here, bishul could be a problem. This bishul is the source of the zayah. Whereas if you have something completely dry, you're making you're making stuffed cabbage. I don't know, something completely dry. There's no zayah coming out of it. There's no steam. There's no nothing. No problem. It shouldn't be a problem. So if you know for sure that something is not meziyah, you can do it, even though it's melacheks. As long as it's clean. Or do like others suggest, turn on the oven. Use it the next day. But I have a better suggestion, which is, of course, everybody agrees. Cover one up. If you have to use the oven the same day, and even at the same time, you can use them at the same time if one of them is covered with aluminum foil. Then why don't they do it? Because some recipes call it for not being covered. It's very simple. Have you ever baked cake covered? It's not good. I don't think anybody does it. Certain foods may be okay to cover, but not everything. I mean, the baking, you want to get it through. You want it it has to work at a certain amount of time with a certain temperature. Otherwise, I mean, it won't come out right. So that's why the balabosa does not always prefer to have it covered. However, if you always have one covered, you can actually use it all the time for both. If you don't always cover them, you may have to wait 24 hours if there's zayah problem. So with microwaves, you would have the same thing. If you always are makbid that the meat is always covered with a saran wrap, you can use the same microwave for basar and chalav. If the meat, or the chalav, but especially the meat, because the meat has more zayah, I'm assuming, than the chalav. If you're always makbid to cover one of them, then you can always use it with the two of them. If you're not makbid to cover them, you may have this problem of using the other kind on the same day, unless you turn on the oven, or of course, unless you wait till the next day, but you don't want to wait till the next day. So that's what it comes down to. It comes down to, if you cover them both, cover one of them, even lechatchila. But they'll tell you, those who are more machmir, and that's the general ruling, that lechatchila, today the minhag is, let's call it the minhag, not to make basar and chalav at the same time. And usually that has to do with the fact that most people don't cover. So even though you may get away with it by cleaning it up and of course making sure that there's no zayah left by turning on the oven, that if you're asked what the halacha is from your rabbi in having only one oven, is don't do it at the same day. I have to, well, either cover it, if you can't cover it, make sure it's clean, and of course, turn on the oven for a little while to burn it. Any residues left of this.
Especially self-cleaning ovens.
Well, you're not going to always put on self-cleaning. It's so much heat. It takes 3 hours. Yeah.
When we say ben yoima, are we saying 24 hours?
24 hours. 24 hours, right. Yeah. So some, of course, will require you to change the grate, to change the what holds the shelf, whatever it is. But if it's completely clean and you turn on the heat, it should be okay because your food is not sitting directly on it anyway. It's the pot. That's why it's okay. But lechatchila, that's the halacha today. You have one oven, do not do it the same day. You have to do it on the same day. That includes meat and fish too, by the way. Cover one of them, then you can even do it at the same time. Preferably, I tell people, do it at the same day as opposed to doing it at the same time with covered. It's just, it's better not, we don't want to make the mistake of sometimes leaving it uncovered. Finish your flesh, make sure it's clean, turn on the oven for half an hour or so, and then go ahead and do your meal. Uncovered. That's... Yeah, but we spoke about... Yeah, but we spoke about challah before, and challah, of course, you don't want to bake challah at the same time with meat, even though it's not absorbing so much, it's not becoming meat. You don't want, in case you want to eat that challah with grilled cheese, you won't be able to. But that, we will not have that problem of the same day so much. Because then, concerned a little bit of, Zeya, it's not so much a problem. We don't say that. Just like by Reyak, we don't say either that it absorbed. It's only lechatchila we don't. But you want to make sure that the oven is clean. That the oven is clean. And because the reason why challah is lenient is even though there is Zeya, and even though you didn't turn on the oven, is because challah is something dry. It's not mezia. The only time we're concerned about the zeya is whatever you're going to put in right now is also going to be mezia. That which is mezia will extract the zeya. That which is not mezia is not going to pull down the zeya from that top. Are you following? So when you know things are not mezia, like cookies, after the chicken and the steak, you can bake cookies. No problem. Why? Because it's not mezia. And then whatever zeya is still there, won't make a difference to it. The only problem is when the things are mezia. First thing was mezia, the second thing is mezia, you have a problem with the zeya. There's no reach involved now because the reach is long gone. It's the zeya problem right now. So if you wait for the next day, of course it's pogum, it's even better. But if it's kochush, if it's not mezia, then it's not a problem even the same day. Even if it's kli megula, it's completely open. So, surprise your wife, and the next time, for her birthday or anniversary, buy her a second oven. If you can afford it.
Buy a wife.
They're not, wife. Yeah. Anyway, they're not that expensive, unless of course you buy the real fancy, expensive, advanced ovens. Standalone ovens, even though they're large, they present the same problem as the what do you call those inside ovens, as far as being not large enough and being susum, being closed. If you had a situation where you had openings, that would be, of course, perhaps a little bit more lenient. So I think, in my opinion, if you're right, the best thing to do, if you can't wait till the next day, and you need to have the dairy dish, is just cover it. Cover it, and if you cannot cover it because the recipe doesn't call for it, then of course, turn on the oven, clean it up very, very well. You don't have to wait. But, the reason why I am a little bit hesitant to tell people go ahead and do it on the same day is because a lot of poskim today just say they don't do it on the same day. So the lechatchila, that's what we tell people. Don't use it in the same day because of the various issues that may arise. And you're always going to be safer because it's a double pogum. But if you have to, you have the choice. Either wait, turn on the oven, clean it very well, right? And then you can leave it even open, megula, or at least cover it. If you're covering it, you're always going to be safe, but you have to remember to cover it. That's the thing. You have to remember to cover one or the two. And since not everybody does that, we don't always tell them to do that. But whatever you do, make sure that it's very, very clean all around. That there's no residues, because many, many times it spills. And if you have the two at the same time inside, it can very easily spill on the other one. Then you have the problem of one right beneath the other one, which we also said is a problem. Unless, of course, it's something that is completely dry. If it's something that's completely dry and it's not mezia, there's no issue. But then you have to know that it's not mezia. So, any doubt, you ask. Otherwise, these are the various options that you can. Okay, we'll start over here.